is Steve Laffey's Fixing America. And now, broadcasting live from the Fixing America Command Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, here is your host, Steve Laffey.
That's right, Steve Laffey here. Snowed last night in Fort Collins, Colorado. Got a little taste of snow. The kids went out and made a big snowman here. We're Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Got 3 of them out there skipping their schoolwork. Great day here in Colorado, and we've got an important show for you. If you're just tuning in for the first time, this is our inaugural week of Steve Laffey's Fixing America. You get it on LaffeyRadio.com. If you've got an app, just go to LaffeyRadio.com. It should come right up. We're on Facebook, Laffey Radio. Like us, please. I know you people have been doing it. We really appreciate it. We see that growing. And we're also Laffey Radio on Twitter. And so we're out there tweeting and getting our message out. And the message here is simply about how to fix this broken country. And when we know people want to fix it. And whether it's a nice day outside, it's snowing, or it's raining, it doesn't matter. We're going to be here broadcasting on important topics. And there's no more important topic than really what's going on in the show here today. And it really is about how did we get into this relationship with China? Why are we allowing China to become, at the rate they're going, a superpower with us? Pundits all over the country talk about it as if it's already happened. And you have to ask yourself, how did we get here? Because I know one thing, and I've seen polls on it, but I've been traveling the country the last several years on the ground with people, not flying over them. And while these issues never get discussed in Washington about China, communist China, and their growth and their growing military power and the loss of millions of jobs to Americans, they get discussed all the time where the 5 million or so factories have shut down, where thousands of people have lost, millions of people have lost their jobs. They get discussed all the time in the heartland of our country. Doesn't matter whether you're in Indiana or Ohio or Rhode Island, there's lots of losses. And so we've got to step back in this first segment here and look back at communist China, how they got to where they are today, and the implications for our country, which are not good. But let's step back all the way to 1947. 1947 is when they started something called GATT after World War II. You don't have to know what GATT is, G-A-T-T, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. And that was free countries that had already become free, saying we're going to try to promote economic development among countries by lowering our tariffs and trade restrictions, going into court, meeting with each other, us and France and Great Britain. But it wasn't about the communist, the Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union. They weren't invited in. It was free countries. And in order to get in, you had to be one of these free countries. So fast forward all the way to 1999. 1999, there was a big push by Alan Greenspan, all the presidents who were alive, the person running for president, 1999-2000, would become President George Bush. And it was a pretty overwhelming vote in the House, given what was about to happen, which was to allow China, communist China, to enter into the World Trade Organization to get the benefit of trading with America at a rate that no one had seen before, and other countries, by the way, who were in this WTO. In the World Trade Organization, it was a big vote, had to pass Congress. And the President of the United States, the person running for president, who disagreed immensely on a lot of topics. This is the year 2000, March of 2000. They disagreed a lot, but they agreed on one thing, that communist China needed a better deal than the American workers. And their theory and their thought process was so warped at the time that it was hard to understand. But we as Americans, we just didn't pay attention. Our representatives, Democrats and Republicans, mostly Republicans, I suppose, they thought, maybe they really thought, by the way, maybe they thought it would lead to more jobs. At that time of around 2000, more jobs for Americans. The time around 2000, we had an $80 billion trade deficit with China. And to be very simple about it, a trade deficit is simply that something that's usually corrected by the rate of your currency. If your currency goes up or down, it tends to affect how much you can send out of your country. If it's too expensive, you can't send it out. If it's cheaper, you can send it out. Today in Japan, the last 4 months, President Abe has succeeded in reducing his currency by about a third versus the U.S., and his exports are climbing. So we as Americans, by the way, we tried to do this mercantilist policy up until, as we became a world superpower. It's not against countries for trying, but remember, looking backwards, trade liberalization among free countries was what it was like in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And if you wanted to be free and you were getting free, we talked to you about it. But the great push to allow communist China into the World Trade Organization happened in 1999 and 2000. And I want to talk to you about what our leaders were saying. Boss, let's play that first clip. This is Bill Clinton, clip number 1. Bill Clinton talking about how important it is that China enters the World Trade Organization, a communist country. Go ahead, boss.
It's always good to have Chairman Greenspan back at the White House, and I'm especially pleased that he has come today to join me in voicing his support for permanent normal trade relations with China. We all know that when Chairman Greenspan talks, the world listens. I just hope that Congress is listening today. Many members remain undecided, and we are doing everything we possibly can to round up each and every potential vote. I'm encouraged by the vote in the committees in both houses, including both Republican and Democratic members, to overwhelmingly approve extending permanent normal trade relations with China. This legislation now goes before the full Congress. All the former presidents support it, along with former secretaries of state, defense, trade, transportation, national security advisors, chairs of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, religious leaders, many of the courageous people in China fighting for human rights and the rule of law. Momentum is building, but we've still got a challenging fight. I thank Chairman Greenspan for coming here today, and I'd like for him to say whatever is on his mind about this issue. Mr. Chairman.
So there you have it. If Alan Greenspan's for it, we all got to be for it. As the world, of course, the man controls the money supply of America, the world's reserve currency. Of course, when he speaks, the world listens. It was just a very bad decision for America to listen to him. They listened to Greenspan. We didn't see the bubble coming in real estate. We could go on all day about it. Those are other shows. But Bill Clinton was for it, and he's talking about religious leaders being for it. And he's talking about human rights being improving. They've gone nothing but downhill. In fact, just recently, they just announced they're going farther downhill. The human rights violations in communist China are getting worse. And we'll talk about that. But so you have Bill Clinton for it. But you also had, and by the way, Clinton added in here, I want to read you one other thing from Bill Clinton. Here's him giving a speech about China and about this exact topic. 20 years from now, we'll still be kicking ourselves in the seat of the pants for turning away an enormous opportunity to give our children a safer world. That's what I believe. It's not gotten safer. China's military buildup from that day to today is a rapid rate of about 7, 8, 10% per year. They're now over $100 billion and going higher. They've built their first, they actually bought an old aircraft carrier. And we all know aircraft carriers are what you need, along with submarines. They got 61 of them to dominate the seas. And so it's not a safer world because China is a growing superpower. It's never a safer world when a communist country is building its military power up. But it wasn't just, as Bill Clinton said, it was also George Bush. Every president, every presidential candidate, it looked like at least the guy who was going to win. So George Bush, and I have a clip of him, but I'll read you a little bit of what he was thinking. He's going to Boeing up in Washington to give a speech on May 17th of 2000. And he talks about normalizing trade with China and the World Trade Organization, letting them in. Here's what he says about it, by the way, regarding communist China. They have been inconsistent on Taiwan. There's an understatement. I will be clear. They failed to obtain fast-track, quote-unquote, trade negotiating authority. I will fight for it. Okay, so they didn't do anything right there. Communist China mishandled the global trade negotiations right here in Seattle. Okay, he goes on. He goes on to say that, first, trade with China will promote freedom. And this is maybe the most important point. If they were thinking this, they've been wrong. Let's say they really were thinking that somehow by promoting trade and giving a communist country a better trade relationship, they would somehow become a democracy or a republic like we are. Bush goes on to say, freedom is not easily contained. Once a measure of economic freedom is permitted, a measure of political freedom will follow. No ifs, ands, or buts with George W. Bush. He goes on to say, China today is not free, not a free society. At home, toward its own people, it can be ruthless. Abroad, toward its neighbors, it can be reckless. This is the throwaway from the GATT program, which made sure that you were in the free world, could be a liberal democracy, whatever, before we started negotiating trade reductions with you. So we were all on the same level playing field. So if you wanted to sell you some wheat, and you've got computer chips and you're not in the tariffs on both, we'll talk about both of them. We'll try to reduce them so both countries with the laws of comparative advantage can benefit. And that's simply an economic concept. Here it went awry. But back then, in textbooks and everywhere in America, you have this law of comparative advantage. In other words, if Guatemala makes a lot of bananas and we make a lot of Intel chips and they concentrate on bananas and we buy all our bananas from them and we sell them all our Intel chips, both countries will do better. What it really doesn't say is that we'll do a lot better because we can make chips over time a lot cheaper and probably still charge them the same price. Whereas bananas, well, the productivity in bananas is not that great. Not like Intel chips. But that's the theory. But when you put it together, two countries that have vastly different wages, it had never been done like this before, with over 1 billion people making under $1 a day in many cases, really slave labor. Put them together against, skilled artisans, tool makers, and people, auto part people, all over our country. Then it's going to shift over there, and that's what happened. And so Bush went on, he goes on several times about this. But not even them. It wasn't even just them. It was just about everybody. I mean, here's some quotes from not just Bill Clinton. Here's one talking exactly about the trade deficit. Here's Robert Kapp. And on June 9th of 2000, he was the president at the time of the U.S.-China Business Council. Looks like he was representing China in this quote. He said the agreement would open the Chinese market to U.S. exports. It would be, quote, the single biggest step we can take to reduce America's growing trade deficit with China. The single biggest step to reduce it. It's gone from $80 billion a year. Last month it was $30 billion in a month. It's at a $360 billion a year run rate. By the way, it wasn't just people who worked for the government. You get the Free Market Institute, the Cato Institute. They do a lot of good work. The guy who was involved in that, Doug Bando, it's primary U.S. exporters who will benefit. They haven't. It goes on and on. There's really one guy in the private sector who I find one quote, who really could get it right. His guy worked for Morgan Stanley, Joseph Quinlan. He called it right. While the debate in Washington focused mainly on the profitable lift for U.S. exports to China, many U.S. multinationals have something different in mind. The deal is about investment, not exports. Investment in China, shipping stuff back to America using their slave labor. He got it. And you have to wonder, did everybody else just know? Is it a case, even back then, that large multinational companies knew that that's exactly what they were going to do? They were going to increase their profits by manufacturing in China, not for Chinese people who couldn't buy a car back then, not for the Caterpillar plant. They couldn't buy. They don't have enough money. But to put them back, the trade deficit, the trade imbalance would be so great. It'd be so much cheaper over there that even putting large Caterpillar tractors on a boat and shipping them back to America would be cheaper than building them in America. And that ended up being the case. But I knew. I think they had to know. But the press either didn't pick up on it. Lots of Democrats. Charles Rangley, the guy out of Manhattan, thought it was a good idea. He's usually not for stuff like this. But you have to remember, this is where they get their money. They don't get their money from me and you. $20 at a shot, $100 at a shot. They get their money from K Street and lobbyists. They get their money through large donations from people who have real money. They get their money now through PACs. So large U.S. corporations, I think they had to know. They had to know this was what was going to happen. And they got ready for it. And they lobbied for it. And they had George Bush and Bill Clinton together. You know, they've been together before he got elected. And they've been together on like Haiti relief after. They disagreed on just about everything else. George Bush's father was president, agreed on this. How could they all get it wrong? I mean, I could go through some of these documents here, and I will a little bit, but let me just give you one statistic. 2001 to 2011. 2002 to 2012. We've lived through that period. Now it's 2013. It's really the only period, including the Great Depression, where American wages have gone down. Not up, down. Now, if you have an advanced degree, they've gone up slightly, on average. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of people who have no degrees making a lot of money, and got guys who have PhDs in sociology, they're sucking wind somewhere. But on average, the wages of American workers are going down. And no one's talking about, seriously, the president makes statements from time to time, they're going to be tough on China. Romney was running. He loved China trade, by the way, until he was running for president near the end. He figured he was in, there were going to be Republican candidates, so he was going to talk tough. I believe he had no interest in doing anything about China. He was getting all his money from he funded big business. He leveraged up big business. And those are the companies in China today making oodles of money and sending back products to America, taking extra money and lobbying, because China can't go lobby the American government. Say, we love this situation because we got, I'm going to quote now Dylan Radigan from my movie Fixing America, we got a big problem in China. We got all these young men and not very many women. And we got to keep them from rioting. We got to keep them working. And so that's what they're doing. And we have this giant imbalance building up. And I say this, it's almost like we're the drunk and they own the liquor store. And we just keep doing this, but neither one of us are really winning. It's a bad, bad relationship. But you can look through, by the way, a decade of flat wages and how many jobs have really been lost. Here, this is just documented stuff about China, not just about, we've lost at least 2.7 million jobs in the United States, the vast majority of them in the manufacturing sector. We never talk about the manufacturing sector. We talk about high tech. We always have banks in the news. We don't have any real heroes in the manufacturing sector like we did at the turn of the century when we were the manufacturing turn of the 19th century. We've still got great manufacturing people. They're mostly in high tech. But we had a workforce that really knew how to make things. And the thought process is, I guess, that we would all just keep moving money around. And America would be great. No. A dominant manufacturing jobs are by far the most valuable ones to have. They pay the most. They spread out to the community the most. The people who own them pay the biggest property tax. The big manufacturing plant in a city pays the most property taxes. So it funds schools. And so we've seen a continual erosion of especially men in the workforce over the last 10 years. They don't have jobs. They were manufacturers. Talk about wages. Workers displaced by trade with China, just in 2011, the latest data, $37 billion in wages lost. Manufacturing jobs, by the way, pay 16% higher wages than jobs that don't involve trade. So we're not losing just jobs. We're not losing the Starbucks jobs because they're over in China. We're losing the manufacturing jobs. They pay more. And when they pay more, those people pay more taxes. That reduces our deficit. And by the way, it's been minorities who've been displaced the most. People of color made up 35% of displaced workers to the tune of $10 billion in lost wages per year. The list goes on. More than 1 million of the displaced jobs in the last 10 years, 12 years were good jobs in the computer and electronic industries. And because we mostly export low-wage products to China, like agricultural products, workers in jobs supported by exports to China make an average 17% less than workers who lost their jobs due to U.S. trade deficit with China. So there's the situation. That's what happened. And it really happened. And we're still doing it. This is the part that's not understandable for the most part. We've got to change this, and we've got to be a voice for change in this whole relationship with China because of the pollution, the military buildup, their belligerence, and what's happening in Japan today, which we'll talk about after this next break. It's Steve Laffey, Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Please like us on Facebook at Laffey Radio. LaffeyRadio.com is the website. We're going to come back and take up this issue of what we're supposed to do about it. This issue with communist China and their trade relationship with America, which is a disaster for us and it's cost us millions of jobs. Steve Laffey will be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
The call to serve. It has no sound, yet I have heard it in the whispered retelling of honorable sacrifices made by those who have served before me. The call to serve has no form, yet I have clearly seen it. In the eyes of men and women infinitely more courageous and more driven than most. The call to serve has no weight, yet I have held it in my hands. I will commit to carry it close to my heart until my country is safe and the anguish of those less fortunate has been soothed. The call to serve is at once invisible and always present. And for those who choose to answer the call, for their country, for their fellow man, for themselves, it is the most powerful force on earth. America's Navy, a global force for good.
What's your favorite color? Tell us, please.
Kids will spend 20 minutes listening to songs like this.
What's your favorite color? What's your...
How about 2 minutes to brush their teeth? Brushing for 2 minutes now can save your child from severe tooth pain later. For fun 2-minute videos to watch while brushing, visit 2min2x.org. 2 minutes, twice a day. They have the time. A message from the Partnership for Healthy Mouths, Healthy Lives, and the Ad Council.
I'm in almost every school busing classroom. I go to school with your children. We say the Pledge of Allegiance together. You see me around the neighborhood and you tell me that I'm a pretty good kid. Well, I'm one out of every 5 children in America, and I'm struggling with hunger. This problem is closer than you think. My teacher tells me we can grow up to be whatever we want. I want to grow up to be someone who doesn't go to bed hungry. There's enough food in this country to feed everybody. Please visit feedingamerica.org today and find your local food bank for ways to help. Every dollar you donate helps provide 8 meals for kids like me, quietly struggling with hunger. Together, we are Feeding America, brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Well, I finally did it. I opened a 401k.
What? Why? Just wait for the inheritance. We've definitely got a rich uncle somewhere. We're one call away from the winner's circle at the Derby, dinners with multiple forks, a vacation home in the country, using summer as a verb.
You don't actually think that, do you?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs, the Rhode Island Society of CPAs, and the Ad Council.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
The U.S. State Department released a report on Wednesday regarding human rights abuses in China.
The overall human rights situation in China continues to deteriorate.
Representatives from both countries have had discussions for 2 days. Michael Posner of the State Department told reporters at a briefing that the focus was on China's persecution of religious and ethnic minorities, its inhumane labor practices, its abuse of free expression, and other human rights issues.
Twelve years later, after China entered the World Trade Organization, human rights situation in China is deteriorating. We talked last segment, George Bush, all of his people with him, President Clinton, every former Secretary of State, every living president in 2000, Alan Greenspan thought that trading with China and their taste of freedom, which they don't have, But their taste of freedom through trade would allow them to become a democracy. There was no thought of all of what would happen to the price of oil. How you all enjoying driving around at $3 plus? Because China is becoming the greatest importer of oil, as we are becoming slowly but surely, it looks like, by the grace of God, not by policies by this administration. We're starting to make up a difference in starting to reduce our dependency. And that's a theme. But see, the theme is coming through growing China's strength, communist China's strength. And now they're realizing 12 years later, hey, we better have a big Navy. We've got to protect communist China. They're saying we're going to have to protect the Suez Canal. We're going to have to protect the Middle East. We don't want that. All this stuff could have been avoided and could be, and we can take care. We can actually have a lot to do with this now. We don't have to keep going down the wrong road, especially when it's a national vital interest of America. I mean, I've heard Jim Clapper, our head of national security, when asked, what's the biggest threat to America? He says China. And the people, and the congressman sitting around there almost like, oh, wait a second, he exposed it. He shouldn't have said that. He should have said someone in the Middle East. But obviously it's not someone in the Middle East, the greatest threat to national security of America. It's China. It's communist China. Second would be Russia. But they're slowing down. Russia's losing population as quick as they can. The other thing that's happened, though, is the increased use of the media of almost an assumption that they are a superpower. I mean, their GDP is half of ours right now. And of course, it's growing faster. Or at least they say it's growing faster. This is China, communist China. But article after article, it's like an admiration society by people who would normally write. By the way, the people in the press who write about this, I always wonder, do they realize if we were a communist country, they would be the ones lined up and done away with as quick as possible? So when they're talking about communist China, why all the positive comments? In fact, it came out today. I'll go through today's article in the newspaper. But there are headlines, and I could have brought in like 20 of them. But the headlines, here's one: superpower rivalry between U.S.-China shows signs of softening, which it doesn't, by the way, at all. But they're using superpower rivalry. 10 years ago, they weren't a superpower, and they weren't rivals with us. But now that's what we hear all the time. We hear about them being the superpower, like it's already happened. We spend $630 billion a year on national defense. They spend $120. We've got established bases in a lot of places. Whether we should or not is not what I'm saying. We're increasing our presence because of what's happening in China. We're increasing our presence. Now we're kind of shifting to the east. And maybe that's the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower talked about so wisely, just shifting out of the Middle East and shifting to the east, toward China. And we're going to talk about what Japan is doing about it, because Japan gets it. But I'm amazed. I mean, here, for example, last week, 2 weeks ago, whenever the shutdown was going on, this is that TV show about the shutdown, where they were going to shut the government down. They actually did. But they paid all the workers their back pay, and then they opened it up again just before there was going to be this default, but there was never going to be default. Yeah, that TV show. Right up there with 60 Minutes and some other show you might watch on TV. Here's China state media blasting the U.S. shutdown. And what do? They have the you-know-what to call for a de-Americanized world, a world that doesn't really include America. That's China. And we give them a 40% discount on goods. They keep their currency at least a third cheaper. It is so cheap to manufacture in China that when the Golden Gate Bridge needed to be replaced, the only fabrication plant big enough to make something big enough to replace the bridge was in China. And they shipped it on a boat for 6,000 miles. Do you know how heavy that is? Do you know how bad that is for us? What if one of our bridges, or 20 of them, were bombed tonight? We'd be looking at World War II again. We don't have any planes. We don't have any tanks. We do have planes, but we need a fabrication plant big enough in America. We need several of them to build large bridges, if only for national defense purposes. And by the way, our bridges are falling apart anyway. We need some fabrication plants to build bridges. So here they are calling for a de-Americanized world. They're frustrated. This article published on Sunday conveys Beijing's, this comes out from the government, Beijing's frustration with the spending and debt impasse that has paralyzed Washington for more than 2 weeks. They're not frustrated. They're happy. They are happy anytime that we're having a problem because then our reflection in the world is less and they can go into Africa. They can go into the Middle East and say, look at those kooks over there. It's a business thing. Hey, listen, when I was at Morgan Keegan, that's how investment bankers operated. There'd be some rumor about an investment banker handling a case or a sector that he left, and they say, oh, that firm can't do that. We do it better now. Same thing happens with countries. All the time. So here's an article today. Political gridlock, Beijing style. They've ordered what they call a plenum, if that's the right pronunciation. And they order these things when they have, here's a country that we trade and give a 40% discount to. We allow them to pump the market whatever they want. If they want to just dump solar panels, they just dump solar panels. They increase their market share by 5-fold. We just let them do it. Chinese leaders opened the window slightly on a pivotal Communist Party conclave, blah, blah, blah. The Politburo, the top 25 leaders, set the dates Tuesday. And they're going to invite the other 370 members of the Central Committee. That's 395 people that are in control of 1.3 billion people's lives. And what do? They force people to leave cities. No, they just leave. Hey, get out. We're building a city over here. Leave. They take Christians. They took this guy, Chen Guangcheng. He goes by Chen. You might remember him. We give a 40% discount to people who beat blind people. It's a blind man. He's in America today. He escaped. They beat him. They beat his wife. You might remember this. This is a couple of years ago. It was appalling. It's a country that threatens Norway because they're going to award a Nobel Peace Prize to a guy they got in jail. I think he's still in jail, a dissident. And the weakness of America, they see the weakness of America even in our educational system. There's a professor over at Beijing University who just got fired because he talked about democracy I read the article, in such innocuous terms. He wasn't standing on a street corner waving an American flag. He just said democracy is good and signed some petition. They fired him as a tenured professor. And we have relationships. Stanford, many other universities have relationships with that university in Beijing. They said nothing. Only Wellesley, all-woman school out of Massachusetts, said forget it. And they offered that guy to come over and teach if he can make it over to the country. So they do this all the time. Christians disappear in that country. Not just Christians, by the way, these other religions. They're not out in public. So we fund Chinese oppression. How do we fund it? Here's what China has to do. In order to keep the currency stable, we always worry about them owning so much of our debt, 1.3 trillion plus now of our debt. Largest owner of our debt. It's not because they want to own it. It's not because they need the extra cash or the 0.25% that the head of the Fed, Ben Bernanke's got that stuff is yielding right now. They have to buy it because they got to keep their currency cheap so they can export to America. So when the stuff comes over, they've got to buy U.S. dollars to keep the dollar stronger. They've got like $3 trillion in hard currency. Then you have to ask yourself, how's this working out for them? Well, it's working out for the 395 members of the Politburo who have, some of them billions of dollars, have homes in Vancouver, Canada, who buy businesses, use graft and corruption all day long, like an old mafia outfit. They're doing fine. And the people in China that we fund their oppression, they jump out of buildings. They work at an Apple computer factory and jump out of buildings and kill themselves. Watch the pictures. There's cities that are empty. So this isn't working out for any of them. It suppresses all their purchasing power. I mean, China could have slowly but surely done better. But now that the Admiration Society, though, with the press, listen to this article. This is today. This is the Wall Street Journal today, written by a guy named Andrew Brown, Brown with an E. To admirers outside the country. Who are the admirers? Who admires China? Some thugs in Chicago? Who's it? Putin in Russia? Islamic leaders? Guys who are totalitarians? That's who he's saying, like, to admirers outside the country. Listen to this article. This is how our press, Our conservative press talks about it. China's political system stands far above the dysfunctional democracies of the West. What? In one regard, its ability to act decisively and deliver results that boost economic growth. Of course they have the ability to act decisively. They got 395 people run the whole thing. Everybody around them's got guns. And if you do the wrong thing, you just disappear. It's a totalitarian regime. But why would someone admire that unless they were for that? The flood of investment that enabled China to sail through the recent Great Recession, they sailed through it? They didn't sail through it. The dizzying rollout of high-speed rail, or even the spectacular 2008 Olympics. Don't get me started on the 2008 Olympics. The Olympic Committee always does this. They did it in 1936 in Germany, I think. Right? A guy named Hitler. They did it in 2008 in communist China. Then this guy's puzzled. Why are there so few indications of major economic reforms on the way? Question mark. And he goes through it. Page after page. He's confused. He's confused because he had the George Bush and Bill Clinton problem. That somehow this was going to lead to a democracy. He's still thinking that 13 years later. What is wrong with Mr. Brown? What is wrong with all the reporters who report this? Why aren't they reporting on a daily basis the people who disappeared? The people who are flooding out of the cities? The millions of people who want to move but can't move because you can't move. The fact that there's no real rule of law. There's no property rights. People just take properties. Now look into this. I go on this article forever. The third plenum is expected to produce the just kind of muddle-through compromise more associated with messy democracies than top-down authoritarian regimes like China. That's a standard article. That's not like I just grabbed that. I found one article. You can find New York Times reporters, most liberal reporters writing about it like China is doing something right and they're to be admired. They're not to be admired. They've taken 2.7 million jobs directly out of America, and our people are suffering. Our wages are going down, not up. It's never happened before. Didn't happen from 1970, 1980. That wasn't that great of a time. Wages went up in America. Didn't happen from 33 to 43. Pick a year. 45 to 55, 1940. Wages went up. And you find article after article where people will write that they're confused as to why this is happening. It's happening because of China, because the unequal wages was so great. By the way, there are people who get it. There are people who get it. One of them is Donald Trump. I think that's clip number 4, boss. Let's play clip number 4 and see what Donald Trump is thinking about China. We used to have somebody who understands it in the press. Anyway, we may not have that clip, but Donald Trump was talking about that they are no friends of ours. He went off and off on China, and he's right. He gets it. I mean, there are. And by the way, here's the other thing: Americans get it. Americans get that China is a real problem. Polls will tell you that. Talking to people will tell you that, especially people who live in areas of the country that have lost so many jobs. In fact, it's estimated in some states, like even Massachusetts, that 2.2% of the people have lost jobs over the last 10 years, directly accounted for by China. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? That's what we got to. There's a lot of things we can do about it, and that's what we got to talk about in the next segment. But this is Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We're going to come back with some real tough solutions for China and talk about them. But with Steve Laffey, www.laffeyradio.com, and we'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages. Turn it on, Steve.
Out of 13 children suffer from some form of asthma, accounting for nearly 1/3 of all emergency room visits.
I feel like I'm choking. It's kind of like an elephant is on my chest. A little whistle sound comes out when I breathe.
But while your child may suffer from asthma doesn't have to make your child suffer. There are simple ways you can prevent your child's next attack. To learn more, log on to www.noattacks.org or call your doctor, because even one attack is one too many.
I feel like a fish with no water.
Brought to you by the EPA, the Ad Council, and this station.
I am an American soldier. I'm a warrior and a member of a team.
I serve the people of the United States and live the Army values.
I will always place mission first.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never quit.
I will never leave a fallen comrade.
I am disciplined.
I am disciplined.
Physically and mentally tough.
Trained and proficient in my warrior tasks and drills.
I always maintain my arms, my equipment, and myself.
I am an expert and I am a professional.
I stand ready to deploy, engage, and destroy the
enemies of the United States of America in close combat.
I am a guardian of freedom and the American way of life.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
There's strong, and there's Army Strong. See what it takes at GoArmy.com.
Picture this, your next trip, Utah, 5 national parks. First, Zion. You're walking, the ground rises, the ground drops, the ground becomes water. Next, Rice. You're riding a mule. You're riding a mule under giant orange strip castles. You are not dreaming. You will not forget this. On to Capitol Reef. Take the scenic route, the really scenic route. Take a path you've never taken and see the stars for the first time. Now for Canyonlands. You're riding a bike. You're riding a bike on Mars. Now you're riding the rapids. Class 2, Class 3, Class 4, Classic. Arches, 5:32 a.m. Some things are worth racing the sunrise for. The horizon lightens. You round the corner. Whoa. This is Life Elevated. The Mighty 5. 5 iconic parks, 1 epic experience. Plan your trip at visitutah.com.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
The cyber spying on the part of China against U.S. industry and the U.S. government is something which is intolerable and needs to be changed. You know, how that happens in a relationship, I don't know. But more and more, China and the U.S. are tied by 1,000 strings. I mean, they will become eventually our largest trading partner. They will probably supersede the size of the U.S. economy sometime in the next 20 years. So, I mean, there are many, many things that are worth negotiating and many reasons that we need to come to some kind of understanding.
And that's Rick Stengel of Time Magazine, they put some beautiful covers of China on the cover. And he doesn't know how. He doesn't know how to do it. But he's also noticed in that clip, he wants his cyber spying to stop, doesn't know how, but he's assuming that they'll be the greatest superpower in the world over the next 20 years. He's just assuming. He's actually letting you know that that's really what's happening. And doesn't have to happen. We just can't let this continue to happen. By the way, cyber attacks, not only do they hit us with cyber attacks, it's costing us about $400 billion a year in U.S. industrial secrets that are stolen. Many times, by the way, on an inside job. So add another $400 billion of industrial secrets going toward China. And there are people who get it, though. There are people who get it, and we're going to play this clip again. We're going to try to play this of Donald Trump. I want to hear Donald Trump, the whole thing through. I want to speak just briefly about it, boss. If you could put that clip back on. Thank you.
Much has been written about China stealing our stealth technology with respect to the helicopter that went down in Pakistan having to do with Osama bin Laden. Now, Pakistan, no friend of ours, even though we give them billions and billions and billions of dollars, the money comes out of their ears. No friend of ours gave the helicopter, and this is a special helicopter, gave the helicopter to Chinese scientists and Chinese engineers to study it. Now, this technology cost us billions of dollars. China stole our technology. I know China very well. No friend of ours. So they stole our technology. We owe China over $1 trillion. we should deduct something from China.
And there's Donald Trump. He gets it on this. And there's lots of people who do. That Trump gets it. He knows they're no friend of ours. And that needs to be our foreign policy. They are no friends of ours. And we're going to do some shows on what China is really doing with the 6 or 7 other countries, whether it's Iran and Russia and so forth, Venezuela, even after Chavez's death. They are no friends of ours. And listen, this stuff makes strange bedfellows because there's many conservatives who are like, what's Laffey talking about? You know? We're free traders. I thought he was a free trader. Guy was educated at Bowdoin College. He's a degree in economics. He generally believes in free trade, not with communist countries, folks. And let's play a clip 5. That's if you would, boys. That's Bernie Sanders talking on Dylan Radigan last year about Chinese companies. Bernie Sanders, at least we have one thing we agree on. This is the socialist senator out of the state of Vermont.
Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders. Let's start, though, Senator, with China. The Chinese embassy doubling down on their lobbying efforts, and that doesn't count what Caterpillar and all the U.S. multinationals must be spending to try to protect how profitable it is to employ those Chinese slaves and exploit the currency to extract America. That's a good business, man.
Well, it is. And I think, Dylan, what we increasingly have to understand when we deal with China, that a lot of the opposition to good policy protecting American workers, that is opposed by these corporations who we have to look at almost as Chinese companies, not as American companies. Ever since the passage of permanent normal trade relations with China, we have lost millions of good-paying jobs. In the last 10 years alone, we have seen 50,000 factories shut down in this country, over 5 million manufacturing jobs lost, and many of these jobs are going to China, to Mexico, to other low-wage countries.
There's Senator Bernie Sanders, former Congressman Bernie Sanders, and I had the number wrong. I think earlier I talked about too many manufacturing plants being shut down, but it's probably 25,000. It's millions of jobs. And he says something there that I think is true. Effectively, large multinational companies have become Chinese companies. And they're operating basically out of China, living in America, best of all worlds, right? Low wages over there, live here, party it up, fly over there once in a while, use their workers over there, put it on a boat, bring it back, make much more money, while the average American, the middle class, falls away. And that's what's happening. I mean, there's a lot of reasons the economy isn't recovering. I mean, it's the amount of debt and how much debt we're throwing after debt and the lack of effect that it has after time. It's a deadening effect. Too much debt and then piling on more debt. It's a disaster. But one of the reasons is simply this. People are giving up. If you've been through some parts of this country, you'll realize that some people are just giving up. They had decent jobs. And I know the theory is always that we're going to retrain people. We can't really, what's the retraining to have someone go flip burgers at McDonald's at the age of 55 who was a tool maker? I mean, really? There aren't the jobs. And we can get them back. And I want to go through some of these solutions because they're pretty plain and they stare you in the face. You know, what could we do? Well, we can simply set tariffs on products coming out of China until we don't have this problem anymore. There would be a total breakup. By the way, it seems like the press would be against it. But there'd be so much noise about this. But why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we at least start with certain industries and just say, no, these are our industries. You're not taking these jobs. And by the way, why do we want China to keep getting stronger? And by the way, for all you environmentalists out there, they are by far the worst polluter in the world. Let me give you a statistic from a couple of years ago. They do nothing but coal, it looks like. They're trying to get into natural gas. This is, it's estimated by 2030, well, China will be off the charts. They'll be doing 12 million metric tons of CO2 emissions. Ours, by the way, in America with natural gas are going down, and we'll be at 6. They do more than us now. They'll be twice as much. People realize if you live in California that about 20% of the pollution you see, maybe 30, is coming from China. Even in Japan, they have massive pollution problems from China, from these coal plants. So we can do that. By the way, you know, we can't buy their debt and they can buy our debt. They own $1.2 trillion of our debt. And as I said before, they don't buy it because of the yield. They don't buy it really to put power over us. There's really no implicit power. I mean, it's just something they talk about in the newspaper. They buy it because they have to keep their currency cheap. So they buy dollars to keep dollars going up. When you buy things, they go up. You sell things, they go down. They take the extra cash and build up their military with those 395 people controlling 1.3 billion. They have no intention of being a democracy. And they slowly but surely do the opposite of what many countries did in the past, like the old Soviet Union, which was belligerent to our face. We're going to take you down. Khrushchev has a shoe. He's pounding it on a table. But they don't have much going for them. Instead, they smile and say, we're going to get along with you. And then in the background, they're building submarines. They're aiming at Taiwan. They're getting involved in what's going on in the area of the South China Sea. They're building up their armaments. They're going to visit people and getting trade deals with people in Africa where they have minerals. That's what they're doing. They want to wake up 15 years from now. They want us to wake up and say it's too late. They want to be what people think is happening actually happen. And still, our elected officials think it's a good idea. We have not Bill Clinton. We got Hillary Clinton while she was Secretary of State talking about this. And I think she's off camera on this thing. In some respects, it might be like a handheld camera. But we have Hillary Clinton talking about U.S. and China. I think it's clip 2, boss, if you would play it.
Together, the United States and China are trying to do something that is historically unprecedented, to write a new answer to the age-old question of what happens when an established power and a rising power meet. And for the United States, we see this as an opportunity, not a threat. We look at the future with great optimism. And we believe that neither of us can afford to keep looking at the world through old lenses, whether it's the legacy of imperialism, the Cold War, or balance of power politics. Zero-sum thinking will lead to negative-sum results. And so instead, what we are trying to do is to build a resilient relationship that allows both of our nations to thrive without unhealthy competition, rivalry, or conflict, while meeting our national, regional, and global responsibilities.
That's Hillary Clinton. And I don't even know at the beginning what she's talking about. It's not unprecedented for an established power to meet a rising power. If you remember, that was Great Britain and America. They were the established power at the turn of the century, and they met up with America. And they're still our greatest ally. And they may not be now with what the president's doing, but they've been our greatest ally for the most part. So it's not unprecedented. Why would you say it's unprecedented? It's unprecedented for a democracy to be helping a communist country become the world superpower. That's unprecedented. That hasn't happened. That didn't happen with Reagan. That didn't happen in the 30s. That didn't happen with Democratic President Roosevelt, Democratic President Truman. That didn't happen. So that's unprecedented. That is unprecedented. The thought about the zero sum, by the way, with the negative results and having this whole thing go forward without a conflict, well, that's unlikely. And that's why I'm sitting here, because I think this is one of the giant problems of our time. And it's not just me. I mean, it may just be me in America sitting here talking about it, because there's no other radio show talking about it. They're not going to talk about it on the news tonight. Not the way that we're talking here. No one's calling for stopping trading with them if that's what we have to do. We're throwing tariffs on them at the very least so that we don't have a trade deficit, or saying we're only going to trade freely with countries that freely let their currency trade. That way their currency would get stronger and we would start to eliminate the trade deficit at the very least. There's a lot of things we can do. But the premier, the president now of Japan, Abe, he gets it. Abe says Japan ready to counter China's power. He's actually talking about conflict. I want to talk to you about Abe because he has gotten a lot of power in Japan. They have finally figured out it's been 30 years of disaster for Japan, looking inward. They're starting to look outward, but they're sitting there a lot closer. Take a look on a map, and I don't bring a map with me today. Take a look at China and Japan, and then realize again how blessed we are to be in America. Geography. A lot of foreign policy is about geography. It's geopolitics. Japan's an island nation. They don't have any of their own natural gas. Basically, they got to import all their energy. They got these nuclear power plants, and one of them, as you know, blew up and destroyed part of their country. They've got older population. They're very thrifty. They save a lot. They have a giant deficit, but it's all internally owned, so they think they can manage it. It's another problem. So this guy is now taking on the issue of China. And listen to what he has to say. There are concerns that China is attempting to change the status quo by force rather than by rule of law. But if China opts to take that path, then it won't be able to emerge peacefully. So it shouldn't take that path. And many nations expect Japan to strongly express that view, and they hope as a result China will take responsible action in the international community. This week, China's getting ready for big live warfare games off one of their coasts, off one of their small islands. There are islands that these people argue about back and forth that are near China, mostly near Japan, and Japan's taking steps to make sure they put people on them. And China's is very upset about this. This happened in the 30s. It's happening now. Japan will not go down quietly. They see what's happening with China's military strength, and they're going to start to counterbalance it. And they expect us to be the leader. They don't say we will be. They say in the world today, there are many things which only the U.S. can take care of. And that's true. Largest military by far. In this context, the U.S. takes leadership, and we expect the U.S. to do going forward, which we haven't done. We are shifting toward that region. Abe of Japan gets it. American leaders do not. There's nothing going on in the House of Congress today except a charade about the debt. There's nothing going on in the Senate today about this. There's nobody who ran for president who really talked about this. There aren't congressional candidates using this as an issue. We are effectively, like John F. Kennedy wrote about England, while England slept, we are effectively asleep. And we're playing into the news articles about them already being a superpower, and some people are waking up and saying that they are, that they rival us, equal to us. They are not. They've got massive geopolitical problems. They're going to have a massive problem getting all the energy. And if you look back from 2000 to 2013, look at all the pollution that they've caused. Where are the environmentalists on this? Look at their military rise. Look at what they do with North Korea. Look what they're doing in Syria. Look what they're doing with Russia. They are uniting against America any way they can. In the meantime, we invite them to state dinners and parade them around and share military operations with them sometime. And as Donald Trump said, give them technology secrets, which they extract from stealing. They extract from when you locate there. They extract it any way they can. And they're going to continue to do it. And we've got to make it stop. And the one way to make it stop is that we've got to slow down their economy, in fact, turn it negative. They are not a friend. The only way any of these countries are ever going to cry uncle and say we're going to be a democracy is that they're really losing. I mean, even in Russia's case, what happened in the Soviet Union? Reagan, we helped to build up to them. They collapsed. 100 million people started, or something like that, started to live free. Out of desperation, they had to jettison these. Soviet Union had to jettison these countries. They lost their power. Now, because the price of oil is up, why is the price of oil up? Why are you paying $3.30 at the gallon at the pump? Because China's in the World Trade Organization in 2000. That's why. So we've several solutions. Put these tariffs on them. Stop this trading with them. Tell them you can't buy our debt unless we can buy your debt. Though they won't do that now. Their currency will have to make their currency fluctuate. We could go on for several more hours. The show's coming to a close. This is an important issue. Please tune in to LaffyRadio.com. Get us on Facebook, Laffy Radio. Like us there. Tweet. Listen to our tweets. Get on our website. We're going to be talking about these important issues, well, until they make me stop. And these are very important issues. We'll be back with another important issue tomorrow about career politicians, about term limits. This one's actually more important. This is something we got to talk about a lot. Anyway, this is Steve Laffy. Steve Laffy's Fixing America. I appreciate you listening in. Thanks for all your help here today. And tomorrow I will learn how to use these mics. God bless. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Steve Laffey's Fixing America radio program on the Laffey Radio Network. Fixing America is broadcast Monday through Friday afternoons at 3 p.m. right here at www.laffeyradio.com. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or account of this broadcast without the express written consent of Laffey Network, LLC is prohibited.